Hi, this time I wanted to reminisce for a bit because I was cleaning some things around the house, moving some stuff from one room to the other, and I found this. I'll see if I can show it to you without the image stuttering or getting choppy because I have pretty bad video quality. So I would try to show you this image or this turn page from afar. Really turn page. It's the first Dragon magazine that I ever purchased in 1997, I think. So it's pretty damaged. As you can see, the magazine didn't make it, but it brought so many memories, and I will get into that in a few moments. But I just wanted to give you like a brief overview of the things that came to my mind because, for example, here you have a column or an article. Again, excuse me for the choppiness of the video. Hopefully it will readjust somewhat. This is an article written by Alan Barney. Some of you may know him personally even, but it actually felt, yes, like very nostalgic because Alan Barney has written some things for Dungeons and Dragons, and he's currently the one running Bundle of Holding. And a few years back, I wrote to Bundle of Holding asking about a certain bundle, and he replied. I have exchanged the emails with him, and he is very, just getting to the point, but nothing personal. More like, oh, I want to ask about this bundle, etc. He's very courteous, so it's great to know that one of the maybe you could call him a legend, perhaps in role playing games. He's actually such a cool guy. Here you have some news from things that happened in Gen Con from 1997. For example, Elmore hospitalized on August 6 while driving with his children to the Gen Con game fair. Artist Larry Elmore suffered a heart attack. He had an angioplasty at St. Vincent's Hospital, spent 2 days in the coronary critical care unit, and was released August 10. Daughter Jennifer Elmore said the 49-year-old artist is expected to make a full recovery. So yes, it took me down memory lane, taking a look at all of these different, like, some reviews and previews. But the thing that really... Oh, here you have images from those Dark Heaven miniatures from... yes, Dark Heaven and Doom. Hopefully I will be able to show this correctly. So yes, really, that's great. And in the cover, there is this thing that really took me back to the past in a very somewhat aggressive way. It's an old ad for the Lands of Lore 2 Guardians of Destiny computer game. Okay, let's see if I can get this to... Hopefully you will be able to see it. Again, excuse the choppiness of the video. But the thing that really... Well, Lands of Lore 2, I think it presented somewhat of a... I guess you could call it a milepost or an important moment in my role-playing game career, both in computer games and in tabletop role-playing games. I have talked in another video how Final Fantasy XI influenced me somewhat in the way that I run certain adventures in role-playing games, but Lands of Lore also had a great impact. Lands of Lore 2. There are 3 games in total in the series, if I'm not mistaken, Lands of Lore 1 and 3. In fact, I think I have them in my Good Old Games library. I still haven't played Lands of Lore 1 and 3, so I will definitely take on those games eventually. You know how those games just pile up and you have so little time and sometimes limited organizational skills to play those games. But yes, I will eventually play the entire trilogy and I will play Lands of Lore 2 again. But like I said, this took me back to that moment. I was just getting into Dungeons and Dragons, through Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I was so fascinated. But I was still trying to get into Forgotten Realms, so I purchased this Dragon magazine and I was looking at all of those articles and ads that talked about different Forgotten Realms products, and I was just so fascinated. And then that was my. I think that was actually my, if not my first, my second experience, or my awareness when it comes to Ravenloft, old school Ravenloft, when it was actually really good. I remember seeing that it was one of the Van Richten's guides, and I was like, "What is Ravenloft? What is that? What is that thing? It looks so creepy, so macabre. I really want to get into that because I've always been a fan of horror." So yes, like I said, I was looking at the magazine and I saw this ad of Lands of Lore, and I thought, oh, it's one of those computer games that you're playing kind of like in first person but with a portrait. And it's one of those really complicated games, surely, because I had some. Because I was quite immature when it comes to my understanding of computer and console games back then, of role playing games, like Might and Magic and such. There was a really awesome. It was for the Nintendo Entertainment System. I don't remember the name, but it was one of those, like I said, like a first person dungeon crawlers. But the innovation was that you could play it with four people, three or four people. So I had my, I think it was called the multi-tap adapter, and we were trying to play that game, but we were three very inexperienced players. We didn't understand that in those sorts of games you needed to keep track of things. You needed to keep a map. You needed your graph paper and take note of where the different items and traps and teleporters were located. So we had no chance at all on taking on that experience. We were just moving blindly through the dungeon, not keeping track of the places that we were going through. It also didn't help that the two players that I was playing that game with, they had, like when they say the monkey brain, that their mind simply cannot keep still or concentrated. So we had no chance of finishing that game. So when I saw Lands of Lore, I was thinking, that game looks so somewhat difficult to play, probably like Might and Magic and such. I'm never going to be able to play it correctly. But there was still something about that ad that I showed to you. You see that I really want to show it to you again. I'll see if the image doesn't get distorted again. Okay, let's see. That place in the ice with the weird alien fortress. That's the fortress of the Ruloi. That's one of the enemy factions of the game. So the advertisement was really good. And you know how they like hand things up, saying things like, Westwood Studios introduces the most fantastic experience in the history of role-playing games. So I got really curious about it. But because I usually purchased my games back then when I went to on a trip to the USA to visit some relatives there, I didn't think I would be able to purchase that game. And back then the internet was still pretty young. Oftentimes purchases weren't that reliable, and I didn't have a credit card. So to me it seems like it seemed like I wouldn't be able to purchase that game. But shortly after seeing that ad, I went to, I think it was Sam's Club, and I was just looking at the different video games, and they were quite very mainstream, like you would see anywhere, and no, I didn't expect to see something a bit more obscure like this. At least when it comes, like I said, the sort of themes or games that you would normally see on the shelves. And I saw Lands of Lore Guardians of Destiny. I was quite shocked, so I immediately purchased the game. It was quite weird because all of the box, the text was in Spanish, the instructions were also in Spanish, and they were telling you as if you had purchased the Spanish version of the game. I don't know if there was some sort of error, but when I started to play the game, it was the English version, and I was quite thankful for that, because if I understand the language of a particular game or book or whatever, I prefer to read it in that language or to play it in that language. So I was thankful that it was actually the English version. Mm, Lands of Lore. Well, I will have to mention some spoilers, some medium spoilers, just to express how fascinating the game was for me. Maybe if I play it today, I will think it's a bit unremarkable, perhaps. But well, I would still prefer it to Oblivion. Elder Scrolls of Oblivion felt too artificial an experience for me because of the randomly generated ruins and the gates that suddenly appear, and the way that I never liked the Oblivion conversation where they kind of like zoom into the front of the person that you are talking to, because in real life you don't talk like that to people. Sometimes you're like staring them from the side, or you're not perfectly matched, as if like I said, like a perfect portrait. So it felt so artificial. The events, the patterns of the AI of the different non-player characters also felt, yes, just a bit too lackluster in my opinion. So well, Lands of Lore 2. I will try to express how it had an impact on my style of running tabletop role-playing games. For those of you that do not know about this game, you are playing as Luther. He is the son of the villain of the first game, the an evil witch. Because his mother was an evil witch, for some reason he got this curse upon him. He has this problem that he randomly transforms into a hulking mutated beast of sorts, like some sort of Sasquatch, but with a weird fang, like projecting itself out of his face. It's very weird transformation. And the other transformation, he turns into like this little mini dinosaur or lizard, very tiny creature. Obviously, when you are this hulking beast, you are incredibly powerful when fighting. And well, not perhaps not that incredible, but sufficiently powerful to the extent that you feel that you have an advantage over humans and perhaps a better chance against monsters. And when you are this little lizard mini dinosaur thingy, well, you're quite incompetent when it comes to fights. You can get killed by some very small enemies, and you have no control over your transformations. Only later on in the game you will have the capacity to transform at will. But when you first start playing, and the first half of the game, if I remember correctly, you have no control over your transformation. So sometimes you're fighting a lot of enemies and you turn into the monster and you're like, yes, like you feel like the Incredible Hulk. But if you're fighting several enemies and suddenly you turn into this small lizard, you better run because you have no chance. And while you're human, you are able to use magic and swords and all sorts of weapons. So I really went a bit nervous into the game. Like I said, I had some negative experiences with those sorts of computer role-playing games in first person. But I started to get the hang of it. I think the instruction manual did an amazing job with presenting a tutorial. But I always found it a bit puzzling that the manual described this fight against this guard, because at the start of the game you are escaping from a prison, you're from your prison, your cell, because you are the son of that villainous hag. They think that you are also evil, and because of your curse they also think that you are unpredictable. But because you turned into this very small lizard, you managed to get outside of your your jail, and you start to make your way escaping through a series of caves. You start to fight guards and all of that, and I started to get the hang of it. I never created a map. The game is not that complicated, thankfully. Unlike, like I said, compared to Might and Magic and Wizardry, where you need to make those maps, or you need to download or print some maps from the internet, from GameFAQs or game FAQs, but in this case it wasn't that difficult. So as I moved through the game, I became fascinated with the level of realism. Here in YouTube, I actually found a documentary, but it's in Spanish. You maybe there is another, yeah, version of the documentary in English. With it contains interviews with the production studio, with the different people that created the game. Some of them really exaggerated things about the game, but you can still feel a lot of passion from the entire team, how it was like creating a movie, because back then there weren't too many games that had that cinematic experience. Many of you know Westwood Studios because of that. They were somewhat, perhaps you could call them to a certain extent, pioneers in that style. So it felt like a very cinematic experience when you are talking with the different non-player characters. I really like that. Like I said, they don't have like that set portrait style of conversation. They are usually perhaps looking at you from the side, or sitting down in a weird angle. The screen doesn't like zoom into them. It always the characters, they always feel like they're, it's a natural conversation. Sometimes they even attack you through midways through the conversation, and it feels, the transition feels great in my opinion. Something that I really loved about Guardians of Destiny is that many of you know, many of you have read Lovecraft. I mentioned this in one of my videos where I talk about H.P. Lovecraft. Sometimes he mentions these amazing, fascinating places, but the main character, there are many times in that the character never visits those places, and you are left with a lot of curiosity and fascination about those cities and those eldritch temples and all of that. Or when the character actually gets the chance to go into those temples, then is when the character dies or goes insane. But here in Lands of Lore 2, Guardians of Destiny, they mention this city of the ancients. When it comes to the plotline of the game, it's very much related to gods. There is an evil god and a good god, and the evil god, which has the name of a real demon, so I'm going to pronounce it with the thickest United States accent possible, Belial, because that's not the correct pronunciation in Hebrew. So that way I won't attract any bad mojo. So this evil god, well, he basically wanted to do what any evil god wants to do, take over the entire world. But there is this also like deity-like creature, the Droracle, kind of like a half dragon, half man sort of deity, and he's going to help you in your quest. It's not great help, but he's still like pointing out some things and setting you in the correct path. When you enter his museum, you see so many things, weapons and valuable treasures and artifacts. And if you just, it's supposed that you're supposed to move through that museum-like area to continue with your mission, trying to stop the plans of Belial from taking over. But you can try to take weapons, and I started to see all of those swords and relics and artifacts, and I was like, oh, you can take them, but if you start doing that, some of them can actually kill you. They have this alarm system, magical alarm, and yes, you either you get killed by some of the guardians of the museum, if I'm not mistaking that with another game, or sometimes the object just kills you. So it was incredible. I really have to play that game again. Like I said, I played it in 1997. So, as I moved through that museum-like area and you start to learn, that's why it's Lands of Lore, you learn about the lore of the setting, and you hear about this city of the ancients, where the gods used to live in. So you imagine this amazing city and you think, well, I'm never going to explore that place. They just mentioned that to give you like some background, but you actually get to go to the city of the ancients. And I'm going to put a link in the description to the soundtrack of this game. It is amazing, beautiful music. The track for the City of the Ancients is kind of like it has this chorus, this like heavenly choir sort of sound. Definitely check it out. And I was so fascinated when I first arrived to the City of the Ancients, but you also have that perhaps dismay or despair that evil has taken over that place, and that helped me a lot when it comes to running Forgotten Realms campaigns. Anything related to Myth or Netheril, this other place, this place of the elves. I'm forgetting the name of a city, but in Forgotten Realms there are these forgotten places, these decadent places of civilization, of very powerful civilizations that are overrun by aberrations and demons, and the City of the Ancients is crawling with these like Shoggoth like creatures. Some of the enemies in Lands of Lore are very difficult to defeat. It's better to avoid combat. It feels quite old school. There are some that seem almost immortal, and you have to spend your most powerful resources to defeat them, so it's not worth it. It's better to avoid them entirely. And that's what gets me to the other part of this experience, the horror side of the game. There is a very creepy place, the cemetery of the Dracoids, I think it was called. And you have this terrifying gate. At first, you don't know how to get into the cemetery, or at least I didn't know how to. And you see through the gate that it is crawling with these horrible looking zombies. These zombies that look like in a constant state of decay, not like skeletons or mummies. They have like this piece of like shriveled or, well, somewhat like mummified flesh. They are just walking around. And I was so terrified. I was thinking, you have to go there. You have to go inside there. But when you actually enter, they won't attack you if you do not attack them. If you attack them in some way, you better run. They are almost impossible to defeat. I think there is a spell. I think I never identified that one. There is an exploit, if I'm not mistaken, where there is a particular spell that can eliminate those zombies. And if you keep killing the zombies over and over again, you level up quite quickly in magic. But when I first saw the zombies and I accidentally attacked one of them, it was chasing me around the entire graveyard. And I noticed that you have this like net, a magical net that pretty much disintegrates the zombie. And I had to use it. It was expendable. I used it on the zombie and I was like, no, my net is gone. I was saving that for a more powerful enemy. So I reloaded the game, obviously, so that I wouldn't attack the zombie. But as I started to solve the puzzles and riddles inside of that graveyard, I don't know why, but a zombie started to attack me, and I didn't attack that zombie. I never understood why. It must have been a glitch of sorts. But that's when the your chaotic ability of transforming into a small lizard came pretty handy. I turned into this small lizard, and it was very easy for me because you are insanely fast. I managed to get away from that zombie. There, you can also enter the ruins of the Dracoids. If I'm not mistaken, the Dracoids actually made some sort of pact with this dark god, and that's why they ended up cursed. And in the city, the soundtrack for the City of the Dracoid or Temple of the Dracoid, it's also quite moody, creepy. You hear like these wind chimes in the background all the time. The puzzles are quite macabre. You need to pick up this corpse, and then you need to incinerate that corpse, and then you need to take the ashes to this other place. And so yes, fun stuff. And the entire city of these Dracoids, they are filled. The halls are filled with these monsters. I think they are mutated Dracoids. So again, you get that sense of a fallen or decadent civilization that they somewhat they devolved or degenerated into those monsters. Very Robert E. Howard in style. Another really cool place were the mountains, these frozen peaks. Sometimes there was this. Yes, I remember seeing this like a barbarian frozen in the ice, and if you manage to melt that ice, he is going to drop. Yes, the corpse is going to drop forward, and you're going to get his weapon. And that's where you encounter this fortress of the Ad of the Ruloi. I think that's the correct name, the Ruloi. Those guys, they kidnap women and they extract their some sort of essence from them. So it's a very disturbing place you are entering. They are basically aliens. The fortress looks like a UFO, and when you enter that huge alien spaceship, you see like these women floating in some sort of field that they look like they have been crystallized or something like that. So it feels a bit like a graveyard, very creepy and very disturbing because like kind of like they're half naked and they're floating and spinning, so it looks very very weird. But yes, such an amazing game, but it really helped me when it comes to running Forgotten Realms campaigns and later on any role playing game that has to do with fallen civilizations and faraway places and artifacts. Because back then I didn't think too much because about the programming, the inner workings of the game. It wasn't that easy to find walkthroughs for some of those games, especially when they first came out. Nowadays, it's so easy to find guides and walkthroughs. You just have to go to Steam and you see so many guides, or like I said, game facts or game FAQs. So many places, YouTube videos. But back then, sometimes you wanted to get past this level or this enemy, and you had no idea how to do so. And in Lands of Lore, you can get into some dead end situations. For example, there is this silver leaf. You have a sort of alchemy capacity in the game. You can combine things to create other stuff. And a lot of those ingredients are expendable or one use items. And I think some could consider it a flaw of the game, but others may actually like it because it's more realistic. You know how in many modern role playing games you have these items for a quest and you cannot get rid of them because you need them to solve a puzzle. They serve act as keys or some sort of device or mechanism to do this or that. But in Lands of Lore 2 Guardians of Destiny, you need to I became so paranoid that everything that I found, especially if it was, like I said, expendable or only had one use, I kept one of each kind in case I needed it for a puzzle. And when I got to the City of the Ancients, I had already used all of my silver leaves and I couldn't go forward. I had to start the game. Uh, yes, not from the very start, but pretty far behind from one of my older saves, and it was very frustrating. Mm. So when it comes, like I said, my tabletop RPG experience, whenever I ran something related to anything to Netheril or Mithran or any forgotten place, I always just like remembered my experience in Lands of Lore, of those ancient places that are overrun with all sorts of evils. And like I said, sometimes I didn't think too much about the inner workings of the game, so I always felt as if there was something more to explore about that game. Because you could interact with so many things, you could, like I said, take this artifact, go to those ancient cities and temples. I always thought, is there something else that I need to explore? You don't see that too much, like I said, nowadays, because almost everything about a single game is immediately exposed. You could avoid taking a look at those guides or videos or whatever, but there are some very few games that still handle or express that sense of wonder and discovery. For example, Shadow of the Colossus. There are several secrets that are not necessary to finish the game, and they don't give you anything at all besides the sense of discovery of getting to that place that, oh, I knew there was something there. Or if you climb to the top of that structure, you see this small feature, and oh, that's very rewarding when it comes to feeling that the world is real. So Lands of Lore got me, introduced me into that fascination. Introduced me to that fascination. Okay, yeah. And I always try to represent that in my tabletop role playing games. So yes, Lands of Lore, Guardians of Destiny, it's a truly fascinating role playing game. If you play it nowadays, it's probably going to feel perhaps lackluster when compared to other modern games, but I really want to play it again and see if I can get into that mindset, feeling like the world is actually real. I remember there was this other part where there was this fortress and two factions were at war, and a group of soldiers decided to entomb themselves inside of that castle, thinking that they would take the enemies by surprise. It was a sort of Trojan horse situation, somewhat. You find this out because you have some stones that serve to see events of the past. So these guys basically, like I said, they entomb themselves or lock themselves into that place, thinking that reinforcements would get them out, but the reinforcements never arrived. They starved to death probably. So when you enter that place, you know that it's going to be haunted, and you see these corpses, like these shriveled corpses, just sitting around, and if you touch them, their heads will fall off, and you hear like laments, and you get attacked by ghosts, but it's a very creepy, somewhat sad place because of their fate. I really loved those moments. So yes, I just wanted to share with you those experiences. I hope you found this video entertaining. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you and see you later.